Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Biting 45, Episode 10, where we go over the document, problem number 10, brought to you by Couch Potato Brand, Snack Foods and Beverages. A little update on the edible keychain. No one commented or liked or subscribed to those videos, and so I couldn't give it to anyone. And I was recently kind of bored and I ate it. So that's no longer available for those of you that were interested. On an unrelated topic, I lost my keys. So if you have any idea where they could be, let me know. All right. So going into the document problem number 10, we have one of these sort of experimental design type problems, which in my opinion are sometimes more difficult than the data analysis, quantitative type problems where we calculate probabilities or we run a hypothesis test or something like that. Because with those problems, it's sort of like if you know how to do it, then they're all pretty much the same, except for maybe the context changes slightly. But with these problems, they could be, they can ask so many different types of questions, and to justify your answer, it's not as simple as just providing some quantitative evidence. You have to be able to explain your reasoning, and let me be clear, you must justify every time you make a statement. Always focus on justifying why you answered a question in a certain way. Okay. And of course, always answer in context. Always. Somehow try to figure out a way to spin some context into your answer. Okay, so we have a situation here where we're trying to sort of figure out how to eliminate fear of heights, or at least reduce it. And there is this experiment, or this, I just want to say a study for now, where we are going to take 27 people who are participating in this study, and we're going to randomly assign some of them to a treatment where they would get a drug and 2 therapy sessions, and then the others will get a placebo and 2 therapy sessions. And then in the end, we're going to sort of see the improvement in their fear of heights. Okay, so that's the idea. The question, part A, says, was this study an experiment or an observational study? Provide an explanation to support your answer. So if you read through this second paragraph, we have 27 people, and they are being randomly assigned to different treatment groups. So 17 were assigned to receive the drug in addition to the 2 therapy sessions. And then 10 people were randomly assigned to get the placebo in addition to the 2 therapy sessions. So my response was that this study was an experiment, since the treatments, and then notice here I sort of slipped the context into the situation. The treatments were randomly assigned to experimental units, or vice versa. I mean, it doesn't matter if the units are assigned to treatments or treatments are assigned to units. It's really one and the same. All right, but in each case, when I said treatments, I applied the context to what the treatments were. And when I said experimental units, I took directly from the language of the problem that the units are the 27 participants. So in this way, I've included context. I've also stated that this was an experiment, and I backed up my claim. All right, that last part of the sentence after the comma is me justifying my claim. All right, so make sure that your answer contains something like this. By the way, typically with these problems, or not oftentimes, there might be more than one answer as long as you have an appropriate justification. In this particular case, I don't think you can argue against experiment. This is very clearly an experiment because of the fact that there are treatments and the units are being assigned to the treatments. All right, part B. When the data were analyzed, the D-cycloserine group showed statistically significant more improvement than the placebo group did. Okay, so that's great, but based on this result, would the researchers be justified in concluding that the D-cycloserine pill and 2 therapy sessions are as beneficial as 8 group therapy sessions without the pill? Justify your answer. So basically, we're trying to take the results from this experiment and say, and try, we're wondering, can we make the claim that this treatment group is better than 8 therapy sessions? Well, if you look at this experiment, again, there were only 2 treatments, right? As I mentioned here, there was the drug and the 2 sessions. That's treatment 1. And then the second treatment was the placebo and 2 therapy sessions. So nowhere in this experiment do we deal with 8 therapy sessions. And so these results cannot be used to make any claim about the 8 therapy sessions. And so how do you like argue that? Well, we would say, or you could say something along the lines of, we cannot claim that D-cycloserine and 2 therapy sessions is better than 8 therapy sessions because the experiment did not directly compare these 2 treatments. Period. I think that's all you need to say. And let's look at what the scoring guideline actually says. So one thing that came up a lot about this question was, wow, there are some very detailed answers to parts, especially parts B and C. Do we have to be that detailed? And that this also was the case for the document problem 12, very detailed responses. In short, no, you don't have to be as detailed as these replies. What they will do is often give you a very detailed response, and this is just sort of giving you, like, in a perfect world, this is how detailed you would be. But the truth of the matter is, you're up against a timer, and the graders know that, and so they're not going to look for something as detailed as they might give. So if you scroll down and look at how the scoring is actually applied, for part B, you would be essentially correct if the response says no and clearly explains why it is not reasonable based on the fact that there was no experimental group that received 8 therapy sessions and no pill. So I have a feeling that what I said here in this one sentence does that. I said we cannot claim, so that's me saying no. And then I argue that there were no treatments that compare 8 therapy sessions and the drug and 2 therapy sessions. So in one sentence, I've accomplished what they want for an essentially correct answer. Whereas if you go up here, they wrote multiple sentences and seemingly a lot more than what I wrote. But that's okay. Like I said, just get direct to the point, try to include context, which I did here, and justify your answer, and you'll be good to go. Okay, and you can do all of that within sort of a brief, short sentence or 2. All right. Part C. A newspaper article that summarized the results of the study did not explain how it was determined which people received the drug and which received the placebo. And then they give you this situation, okay, what if researchers were allowed to choose, what if researchers allowed the therapist to choose who received the drug and who received the placebo? And in other words, what if we took randomization out of the situation? We all know that's a bad thing. We all know that if we want a representative sample of the populations, then we want to include randomization. So what if we took randomization out of the equation, and we let the therapists choose. So my mindset, so after looking at the scoring guideline, my answer is very different from what they put, but I am convinced that my answer would receive full credit or essentially correct because I've done what they required in the scoring guidelines. And you'll see what I mean in a moment. So this was my answer. Perhaps there is a therapist that gets very positive results and one that gets very negative results. So what I'm doing now is I'm sort of setting up a situation where therapist ability is going to be a variable that might be confounded with the drug. So I go on to say, if the therapist with positive results never assigns people to the drug group, and a therapist with negative results always does, the results of the drug efficacy could be confounded with therapist ability. So, in my opinion, if I go to the scoring guidelines, sure, I can read their response, and their response is very different from what I put, but that's just one possible response. If we scroll down to the scoring for Part C, we would be essentially correct if the response indicates that this method of assignment might create experimental groups that differ in some systematic way other than the treatment and provides a justification that describes the potential confounding. So I think I have a method of assignment that might create experimental groups that differ. And the confounding variable is pretty clearly stated that it could be the therapist ability that is leading to certain results. So I think based on that scoring guideline, what I wrote here does in fact get an essentially correct. I'm showing you this because I want you to understand that if your answer doesn't exactly match what is written in the sample response in the scoring guideline, that doesn't mean you're wrong, right? What you should really focus on is how the problem is scored. So you might write something very different from them, but your words might contain everything necessary for an essentially correct response. All right, so just keep that in mind. That being said, you should take into account what they have written because they typically have a nice way of explaining things, and try to get used to maybe thinking of these problems in the way that they're thinking of them. One last thing before we end. As I mentioned, always answer these questions in context, and again, try to be direct to the point. Always justify a statement, but justify briefly. You don't need to go on and on and on. You are against a timer, and your answers should reflect that. All right, folks. Hope this was helpful. I will see you soon with another video. Take care. Bye.